Hello and good morning. Thanks for coming to today's session, which is called Simulation Theory. Now, I've got the chat feed up, so anytime you want to give feedback on sound or, questions thrown in, just let me know. Okay, so simulation theory basically, we've probably heard of this already, is that the the concept that our reality that what we perceive as to be real could actually be a simulation, a construct of a advanced computer program, just like we've seen in the Matrix. and whether this is true or not is not as important as what you can do if you start to tinker and play with this idea. So, to give you some perspective of what I'm talking about, um, and how far back inward we need to go to understand what we've got our hands on here in terms of framing the mind. We're looking at let's look at the example of the Earth being round or the Earth being flat. Now, we look back in history, we had the flat Earth to begin with, and then, all of a sudden the Earth became round in people's mind, and everyone, you're either crazy or you were backward or whatever. And now we've come full circle now, and now you have people who are starting to put together pretty good arguments for a flat Earth again. Now, personally, I think it's a little silly, but I mean, who knows? In the simulation theory idea, it could be true. And as we know, when it comes to beliefs and the placebo effect, you don't necessarily have to have your belief backed up by the truth for it to have an effect on you and for you to act upon it and to get results in your life. But what if we went a step further and we started to adopt the simulation theory, where possibly we're not even actually here. This is all just some kind of super advanced, hyper immersive virtual reality experience, and we could all be, some form of consciousness experiencing this advanced technology, like some kind of video game, where all of our past memories and our personality is just an installation of coding in some kind of mind brain, which might not even actually physically exist. We could just be this brain in a jar somewhere, or this body in a cocoon, like we've seen in the film The Matrix. And everything that we're experiencing in our environment, even our own bodies, is just a construct of this programming. So if that's true, then, there is no Earth either, right? It's not even flat or round. It's just pixels and code that our brain, or not even code, it's electrical signals interpreted by the brain, like Morpheus has said in the movie. So, I spent a lot of time thinking about this, if you hadn't noticed, and whether it's true or not true, we've got to look at what the value is of adopting this kind of frame of mind, at least for a moment. And so the point I want to get across here, and before we go into that, let's just go one step further. Let's look at technology as it is at the moment. Let's look at how far computers have come in such a short time. Let's look at what's on the horizon in terms of virtual reality and augmented reality. And let's look at some of the stories that we've had in the media, like some of the films, like Spielberg's artificial intelligence, the film Transcendence with Johnny Depp in it, the 13th Floor. There's a bunch of films that sort of tap into this concept that it all could be an illusion. We look back at our history, the Mayan people, the word Maya actually means illusion. And if we go into other cultures like the Gnostics, the Cathars, these these tribes or these cultures that have actually embraced an idea similar to this, and what they were able to do with it was to transcend the norms of thinking and experience. So if we understand that the placebo effect and beliefs don't necessarily need truth to back them up for them to have an effect. I mean, we all know that person who doesn't matter how much evidence you present to them, they're not going to accept it. They're going to twist it some way, and they're going to tell you you're wrong and that their way is right, and there's nothing you can do for them to get them out of the mindset they're in. So this is more about having a flexible, open sort of mindset that allows more possibility into your reality. And then once you've got that foundation of possibly, embracing simulation theory as an idea, then it's about what can we actually do with it and what can we ground into our reality. And just to add a little bit more into that, who are doing things in the world that are just, it's like bringing the future science fiction into reality with SpaceX and Tesla, and I mean, he came up with PayPal when there was no PayPal. And these are people, he's one of these movers and shakers in the world that's actually shaping the reality, not just for himself, but for all of us. And so he was in an interview a while ago. You can see this on YouTube. Look up Elon Musk simulation theory, and people asking him, what do you think about simulation theory and artificial intelligence? And he says, I've had so many conversations about simulation theory that my brother and I had to make a rule that whenever we were in a hot tub, we would not talk about simulation theory. He said that's how much it impacted his life. And he also said that the likelihood of it not being a simulation is astronomical, or something like that. So when you're talking about simulation theory, also it includes the multiverse theory, or quantum mechanics and quantum physics, talking about the observer effect, where as you observe things in your reality, then they manifest, they get created based on your observation. So if you think about everything that we have in our life, I mean, even this bookshelf behind me and all the books in it and everything on that shelf, before it existed, it had to be an idea, it had to be a thought, it had to be an energetic signature. And so if we look at an energetic signature like a signal, when it came in and hit the brain, if we believe that, the brain exists, and I'm just messing with you now, but when it hits the brain will interpret that signal based on its configuration, and then it will either, affirm it, deny it, or reconcile it. Okay, and then it will take action on that signature or not. And this is why, we have the 100 monkey effect, where people all over the world, have the same idea at the same time, and you have similar things all emerging at similar times. It's almost like this signal gets broadcasted out from wherever it gets broadcasted, and many people or many parts of the same mind pick up on that signal and start to ground it into reality. And so everything that we have that we didn't have before, like computers, like electric cars, like space shuttles and rockets, before they existed, it was just this crazy idea that, you know, at the time was probably impossible in people's minds based on the frame of mind they were working within. So when we're talking about simulation theory, it's a useful mindset to begin with, and not necessarily adopt as your primary mindset, but use it as a testing. You know, if you had a lab, you could go into your lab and you could try on the simulation theory mindset, and then you could start to play with it until you could see results of it being useful and effective or not. And that's the other thing. When we're doing these sessions, this isn't to be telling you how things are. This is not to put a stamp of this is reality to you, because in my mind, reality is very flexible, it's very malleable, it's changeable and adaptable. And it's a bit like, you know, computer code. The potential for anything to be created inside that computer is always there. It's just a matter of, are you skillful enough to actually ground it and to turn it into something that's useful and usable. So that's my little disclaimer. You know, this is all about trying things out and testing things out and seeing if they actually work or not. And I do that with things that I'm experimenting with, and I do that with things that other people say is already, you know, is true and fact. And I make up my own mind, you know, because at the end of the day, whether it's true or not true, you're real or not real, your mind will make it real, and you will act upon it. You'll act upon what you believe to be true. And so, you know, there's a lot of talk about beliefs in this type of this world of self-help, this world of spirituality, this world of biohacking and self-development. And I just the thing about, you know, beliefs is that they're changeable and they're not as fixed as you think. Some are very, very robust, but at the end of the day, if we can get access to them and we can step back far enough, then there's a lot more that we can bring into our existence. So just going to pause for a second there and give a moment for all that to sort of reorganize itself, because I know it can be a lot to take on. You know, leaving old beliefs and mindsets behind, even for a moment, can be a bit scary. It can feel like, you know, being out in space with nothing to hold on to. And so we want to sort of get comfortable with this feeling of having no limits, all right? Or we want to push into that limitless space as much as we can. And from there, we can start to decide what's useful to us and what's not in terms of limits, because you will need some sort of limits to function in the reality that you're in. So the question is, what is biohacking? Okay, so biohacking, to me at least, is I mean, if you're in the IT world, then it's, you know, it's the interface of human with machine. But from my point of view, in using simulation theory, it's I think, you know, we're probably already the technology, or we're in the technology. If we look at simulation theory and we say, This could be just a big simulation we're in. It could be a computer program, some kind of super advanced computer program that we're in. Then the technology is us. The technology is how we think and how we feel. That's our interface with our reality. And so biohacking would be to change, have the skill and the distance on those thoughts and feelings to be able to let them come up, see what they are, see how they're useful, how they're not useful, and start to tinker and change those thoughts and feelings, and then reinstall them back in, so we can start to perceive our reality and experience it in ways that we necessarily haven't had before. And so I've said this before in posts going back years, we are the technology. If you look at technology now, artificial intelligence coming into our world, this is an inevitable thing. It's happening, or it's already happened. Eventually that mind, whether it's a hive mind or many individual minds, will eventually want to have a body. So then it'll start to make bodies. And first they'll be clunky and mechanical, and then slowly they'll mimic more and more natural movements and natural biology. And ultimately, one of the in a mechanical body is going to have to face is repair, automatic repair, and reproduction. And that's two things. It's something that we already do. We don't even have to think about it. It's already in our hardware, biological hardware. So if you look at it, human beings, biology, the life of biology is probably, where technology would be going in, say 1,000,000 years or something like that. So we're already there in my mind. But the thing is, perhaps the consciousness that is piloting this biotechnology of being a human being is not up to speed with all of the functions. And that's why most of the time, for most people, we're running on autopilot. So for example, we're not really tapped into the autonomic nervous system to the point where we can slow our heart rate down at will, or we can lower our blood pressure, or we can heal the body faster than normal. I mean, there's a lot of people doing that now, as some of you would know, based on some of the work that's been done previously. But generally speaking, out there, a lot of people, as we've witnessed, are running on autopilot. They're not conscious of their deeper mechanisms. They're not conscious of the configuration of their mind, their beliefs, their values. They don't know why they're there, how they got them, and they've probably never questioned them before. And so from that point of view, if you can see what programming they're running, then you can easily predict their future. And so we do that with ourselves. We look at ourselves, we look at our beliefs, our values, our emotions, we look at our automatic programming, and that gives us a trajectory out into, our timeline. And then based on that, we can pretty much see where we're going to go in life. And so if that's not what we want, then we need to, rather than change out there and, comb the mirror, like let me just comb this hair here. No, oh, that's not working. Why is that not? Because I have to go back within myself, and I have to change here, and then the image starts to change. And so with simulation theory, a lot of things are up for grabs. It's not just about your beliefs and feelings of worthiness, but it's things in the environment too, things like time. And now with with a lot of people emerging into what they're calling the fifth dimension of consciousness, time becomes this malleable thing. Time becomes something non-linear. Time becomes, instead of being on this timeline going through time, we see that time is this illusory thing where you're in this moment of now, in the center of it, and through projecting consciousness, you can move your awareness into the future or into the past across multiple timelines, like infinite timelines. So this is quite a big jump. And so it's not necessarily easy to just take on all these new beliefs and these new attitudes and just start living them. It takes a bit of training to accept them. And what I mean by that is you think about who you are now, what your life is now, and where you're going based on who you are and where you are. Then you have to accept that you're actually a product of your past. All right. Now, that's not good or bad. It's just, it's kind of what it is. Like for this app on your computer to run so you can see me, that had to be programmed sometime in the past, so we can use it now. So, is this making sense so far? Is this interesting? Are you still following me, or have I left some of you behind? Yeah, so training this in takes a little bit of time, if there is such a thing. And one of the other things is to free yourself from that time, that pressure of time. Because if there's no time, then you can take as much time as you need. Another way of looking at this is, and there's lots of cultures that talk about this. Even the Buddhists, one of their more advanced techniques in meditation is to hold a state of mind that is probably, at least in an alpha frequency, if not deeper into a theta frequency, where the veil between what is physically real and what is a dream becomes very, very thin. And you get into what's called lucid dreaming. And it's probably the original or the precursor to simulation theory in terms of, understanding and accepting the possibility that this reality is not real in the sense of what we think it's real. And in the indigenous cultures in Australia, the Aboriginal people, they talk a lot about dream time, and their mindset is not that here we are in reality and then we go to sleep and then we dream, because it's fun or whatever. Their belief, or at least from what I've read, the belief is that they come from that space of where dreams are made from, and the dreams are manifested the next day. And so what you have here is that you start off, instead of in this reality and then having dreams within the reality, you start off that you're not quite, you're in this reality, but you're not of it. And so what you're doing is you're dreaming the reality into existence first, and then when you wake up and you come into what we know as the real world, then we actually experience that dream. And then from that dream, we get our feedback of where our mind is at and what we're doing and where we're going. We get all our data and our coordinates, and then we go back into the dream world, and then we dream. We dream again, and then so we do this loop. And so what that does is that suggests that all the power to create, for good or for ill, is already inside us. In actual fact, um, it would suggest that the whole world that we're perceiving is inside us. And so you've got to remember that the brain, from what we've been told and taught, is a closed box. These sockets here, you know, um, to take in information, is not the brain's not directly experiencing reality. It's going through these sockets and circuits, and then it's interpreting the signals. So even the light that I'm seeing with the eye, when it goes back to the visual cortex here, that's being interpreted too, and that's only a sliver of the light spectrum. That's only what I can see visibly. But you know, the eye is most likely processing the full spectrum, or at least it's seeing the full spectrum, but maybe the software in the brain is not working to perceive like red, right, or you know, these other parts of the spectrum outside the visible light. So this is where we would tap into more, you know, heart-centered stuff, so we can pick up the other signals that are outside the awareness of the and the configuration of the inputs for the brain. So there's a bit of technical stuff on it. So I guess what we should do now is, because you know I like to practice stuff, and I just like to talk about it. I like you guys to have an experience of it. I guess if we start to slow down a little bit, we get a bit more relaxed. If you got your blindfolds ready, it'd be a good time to just sit back, relax, take a deep breath in, and close your eyes. And what we're going to do is we're going to reduce all the external sensory inputs. So as you close your eyes, you're not going to be distracted by the projections of the mind that you had from the past before you began this session. And as you breathe and relax, and you listen to the sound of my voice, you'll notice all the other sounds that you can perceive in your reality. That accompany the sound of my voice, wherever you are, whenever you are. And as you're there, just relaxing and reducing and becoming aware of all those images, sounds, smells, tastes, feelings and sensations in your body. Just notice that they could just be interpretations from your mind that is set up to perceive all those things in those ways. And as you notice that, your mind is set up, however it was set up, to perceive your reality in that way, that just by using your mind to observe the mind, to upgrade the mind, you'll also notice that outside of your perceptions, outside of your personality, and no matter who you think you are, that you're so much more than that, and that no matter how you perceive your reality within the narrow band that you can perceive, that there's so much more than that outside of that. And if you can just imagine for a moment that who you are, where you are, and what you experience to be real could possibly be a simulation or an immersive dream that feels so real that you forgot that it was just a dream. Then, like in a dream, where you became aware that you were the dreamer, dreaming the dream, and that it was your dream that you were dreaming, then perhaps you could start to dream a dream that was a little different, a little less limiting, and a little less inhibiting. And perhaps you could just start to dream about all the possibilities that maybe you could never dream that you could dream of. And if you could do that, then maybe, just maybe for a moment, you could begin to wake up inside that dream. And you could start to change things in that dream. And that you could realize that everything in the dream was originating from you, because you're the dreamer, dreaming the dream. And you could play with it, and you could change it, and you could do different things with it. Or you could also just sit back, relax even more, and observe the dream. you could move beyond the layers and go deeper. And see the deeper meaning behind the dream. And so from here, I'm going to give you a suggestion, and you can take it or leave it. It's entirely up to you. And the suggestion is, throughout your day, whether you remember or not, can you ask yourself from moment to moment, is this a dream? And see what feedback you get when you ask that question. See if you can align your mind with the mind of the dreamer. After moment in your day, can you take that moment to wake from that dream and just pull back a little bit and observe and pay attention to the strangeness of the dream? And if you did this throughout your day, several times a day, at different times of the day, lighting up all the different parts of the mind with this idea, gently at first, and then as you got more used to it, as you became more bold, growing your influence within the dream. Can you imagine that over time and through time, where you might be and what people might perceive as a week, a month, or even a year, just by practicing this one little skill? And since we're dreaming, and it's only a dream anyway, and that anything's possible in this dream, let's time travel into the future after that 1 year. Let's teleport yourself there and observe yourself having practiced this skill for an entire year. And look all the way back through the timeline and see all those tiny little changes that you made, seemingly imperceptible, ordinary, sometimes even boring. No emotion in it at all for your personality and your ego. No validation coming from outside yourself. Just doing it for the sake of doing it. Just playing the game for the game's sake. And can you see where you used to be all the way back to the point in time where you heard my voice now saying to you, what would it be like if you could become aware of the dreamer dreaming the dream? Now, and if you could be that future self a year from now, looking back on all the things that you've achieved and changed, and all the fun you've had along the way, and all the things you've learned about yourself. What would happen if you looked forward another year? Maintaining that skill, allowing it to develop all on its own, without any effort. What changes would you have made along the way? What would you know now that you didn't know before? Who would you become? What would you have? And what layer of the game would you be playing at this time? And as you allow your mind to dwell on all those possibilities, just gently rest your awareness on those points in time. See those moments in time of yourself changing through time. Based on practicing this one skill. And take the time now to observe and absorb all those new learnings from practicing this one skill, from making this one change. Having given yourself the time to change, and for all the integration, updates, upgrades, and reconfiguration to have taken place. And now, in your own time and in your own way, from that future self, a year out, from a year from now, start to bring all that energy and all that awareness and all that learning back through the timeline, back towards yourself, back to that future you a year from now. And see those two future yous merging. And if you can do that, then in your own time and in your own way, bring those merged future yous from a year from now all the way back into the present moment, into your body, here and now. And begin to feel how it feels to allow those energies and those frequencies to merge into the present moment. Relaxing and breathing and allowing all those changes to take place. Feel that information and that energy grounding itself into this body, into this mind, into this space, and into this time, if there is such a thing. And as you do that, ground your awareness, connect it all the way back, beyond space and time, to that awareness and intelligence that is giving rise to this entire experience that we might call the dreamer, dreaming the dream, experiencing the dream. And just breathe and relax and allow any changes that need to happen now to take place in this moment. Slowly now, gently now, come back to your body. Begin to move gently your body, grounding and settling all these changes into this body right now. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So, how do you feel? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? How has your perception of your reality changed? What changes are you aware of? Now, moving on from here, I'd recommend that when you start to, yeah, my mind and heart started beating super slow. Yeah, cool. So, when you're making these changes, I would recommend that you start off super slow. Um, and, start off with the low hanging fruit. Start off making the changes that are easy. Start taking the wins that are right there. Start celebrating those moments just because you can. Okay? Um, yeah, that was a really nice experience. A few light jolts. That's cool. So I think, we covered this a little while ago, these jolts in the body. Like when you're getting these downloads, these new energy signatures are coming through, it's like you get this feeling from time to time. And for me, that's, the energy's coming, like you've got a new current of energy coming through your system. You've got this, internal tube going, energy's going up and down, this centrifuge of energy. You've got these vortices coming out, the 7 energy centers or chakras, whatever you want to call them, and you know you're taking in this information, you're digesting it, processing it, reconfiguring it, accepting it, rejecting it, merging it together, creating some sort of product. It's becoming your mind, it's becoming your body, and then you project that, broadcast that out into your field, and then it starts to have an effect on your reality at a quantum level. And if there's enough energy going towards that, then it starts to coagulate and become real. And sometimes it just manifests. And you ask that question, like, did I actually make that happen, or was it always there and I just started to observe that it was always there? Either way, in your mind, it's the same thing. And some things you see that you have to, or maybe you want to interact with it, and you want to shape it and mold it like a craftsman, like an artist, like an energetic artist. And so, this is where life becomes a little more supple, a little more malleable. Instead of being this hard, rigid, solid reality that you have to sort of mass and meets mass, and you have these collisions, and it's all about inertia and physics and stuff. Now it becomes more like Play-Doh. It becomes more malleable, becomes more like code in a computer. And if you don't like something, then you slow down, you relax. When you relax, you go deeper into the operating system of the mind and body. You tap into those more subtle layers of energy. You go beyond that sliver of visible light reality, which you think is all there is. You start to get into these other areas in the spectrum. And in these other areas of the spectrum, there's more, the properties of the physics alter slightly, and therefore the rules of what's possible alter as well. So depending on what you're trying to create at what kind of level will depend on what kind of frequency you need to be in to make those changes. So for example, when we go into meditation, or we go into a relaxation practice or a mindfulness practice or training in our brain and our body, or having a spiritual mystical experience, whatever it is, we're training to go into these different frequencies, because at these different frequencies different things are possible and have different effects on the third dimensional space of reality. And so I use I'm learning a lot about computers at the moment, and coding and all that sort of and programming, because it's probably the closest metaphor that everyone interacts with all day long that relates to the kind of here. And so, if we go back thousands of years, religion was the way we'd get there, and then we'd have all these stories and metaphors, because the brain is easily programmed through story and metaphor and language. And when you're trying to explain a super advanced biotechnology to people that can't perceive the forest for the trees, so to speak, in terms of not understanding that they are the technology that creates the reality and that it's programmable, how do you convey that? Well, now we can start to convey that, because we have a mirror of that technology in terms of computers and phones and internet and all that sort of stuff. So, like, for example, now we can really understand the concept of telepathy a lot more, because a non-local influence, or non-local healing, or non-local communication. And so here we are using a webinar software program to communicate with each other all over the world through all different time frames, because not everyone who will see this now in this moment, although when they see that, it'll be now for them in that moment. And so these communications, this information, can transcend time and space. And when I was a kid and I was first learning about the idea of telepathy, I thought it was like a telephone, because the telephone was the only thing, that you would communicate through back in the day. And it was those telephones, or the push button telephone, the thing that would sit on, that in those movies, if you got hit with one, it would nearly kill you because it was so bloody heavy and clunky. And now we've got these things. You've got a computer in your pocket, literally. They say that the technology in this thing right here is more powerful than all the computing in the entire world when we put a man on the moon. I'm not going to get into that debate about putting a man on the moon. So the idea here that I really want to get through and drive home is that, with simulation theory, anything is possible if you're looking at life through this filter that it could possibly be a computer simulated reality. And therefore, if it is, it can be hacked, it can be reprogrammed. And any rules that we have in there, and I'm not talking about laws, I'm talking about rules like time, like space, like physics. If these are the rules in the reality engine of the simulation, then if we can get our skill level up to a point where we can access those, understand them, and then possibly tweak and change them, and then reinstall them back into the system, then when we come back to experience those changes in our third dimensional reality, it's going to show up as new possibilities to have new experiences. And so if we can keep leveling up, by going, expanding our knowledge, putting more information into our mind, that wasn't there before for the brain to start to work with. And then if we can um, go deeper within ourselves to access those different frequencies, those different layers of the operating system of the simulated reality, so to speak, then it's 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 highly probable that we can change our beliefs, our values, our perceptions, and our very actions and our experiences of what um, is possible in the world. And then we can start to do things and experience things in a way that we would perceive as being normal because we know the magic trick, how it's done. But to the audience looking in that doesn't understand that, it'll look like magic. It'll look like psychic ability. It'll look like, um, you know, walking on water. So these are some things that I think are worth thinking about, because if you do, then you know is the world's your oyster, the world's your playground, and then from that point of view, and remember, it's just a point of view. It's just the theory. You have to decide whether it's going to be useful to you or not. And I strongly suggest you test it out and play with it, and not just for a little while, but you know, extensively, deeply research it. Figure out whether it's going to be something useful to you, like a tool. And if it is, then you know, keep using it. And if it's not, just toss it to the side. Don't worry about it. Don't get all caught up in, you know, right and wrong and whose theory's the best and all that sort of crap. And see what you can do with it. You know, see what you can ground with these techniques into your reality. And now the other thing I want to say, having done all this is not just about deluding yourself and, you know, being, you know, believing so much and holding on to your beliefs no matter what feedback is coming back to you. It's like, test the belief out. Have the belief, create it like it's a piece of code. Okay, I'm going to believe, this is what I want to believe in. And the belief comes up on your operating system. And then you start to see how that holds up in your reality. And at first, okay, you know the process, you're going to get a lot of resistance. That belief has to really be strong to hold up to all the projections from the past that have come up before. And then maybe it'll break, you know, like a piece of software, but you're trying to work out, you know, like this very webinar thing happened in the beginning. It broke a lot of times. It wasn't quite configured right. We had to do a lot of research and go backwards and forwards with tech support and get it all sorted out. Finally, it works, and now it's easy. You know, we just do it, turn it on. And so you play with these beliefs and then work out how, you know, if they're good and where you need to adjust them. And sometimes they're going to break and you have to repair them and redesign them and rebuild them. But I want you to understand that these thought forms are just designs. They're just ideas. They're just beliefs. They can be changed. They can be interchanged. They can be deleted. You can create new ones. You can upgrade old ones. You can bring pieces of beliefs together. You know, I was just looking at an article on the Facebook feed, and it talked about artificial intelligence. They're creating they're creating a program called Deep Coder, which is a program that will help you create artificial intelligent programs even if you don't know how to code. All right, and they are saying that this when you put in the instructions through this Deep Coder program, that it goes off and it starts to look at what other programs are out there and what other code is out there on the internet, and it starts to piece things together and package it and create a code. based on your instructions. And so if we can start to do that with the internal programming of our mind, then, and we make that a habit, then it doesn't take very long before we start to experience these changes. And as we get this feedback, we get into this kind of loop. And this is why I say before in another video, invest in the skill of this, not in what you're going to get out of it. Because a lot of people get started on this and they want to get something out of it. So they want you to give them the code so they can just install it, and then it works, and then they get their thing, and that's fine. You know, there's a for that. In the IT circles, they call this, you know, this kind of behavior being a script kiddie. We just download programs and you use them and you get a result, and that's cool. But for what we're doing here in these sessions, you know, I like to think we're moving towards self-mastery. We're moving towards becoming an artist with how we use this energy, and energetic artist, like I said before. And so we need to know, we need to not just download and use them, we need to understand how they work, why they don't work, what options are available. And then we can start to create our own stuff. And when we create our own stuff, our own beliefs, our own thoughts, our own emotions, our own actions, we have to start to really, truly create our own reality. And that's when you become, you know, that dreamer, dreaming the dream that I talked about. So I'm going to stop bombarding you for the moment. I'm going to open it up to questions again. And if you have any questions, I'll take them. And I'll do my best to respond if I think it's on track of the topic. A lot to digest. I know it's pretty potent, this idea. It's pretty, you know, we're getting into core coding here. This isn't just, you know, changing with the picture on the desktop or, you know, changing your icons from cornflower blue to, you know, space gray. Okay, so one of the questions here is, where can I get more knowledge about Buddhist meditation? Well, I mean, there's lots of resources. There's lots of temples everywhere, obviously. But if you don't want to go to see lectures in person, which, you know, it's cool, it's interesting. There was a great book. I think it's on my shelf here. Let me just have a look. The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. It's pretty deep. It's interesting, but the idea there is that, you know, is to think about what is beyond death. You know, Alan Watts. I think if you YouTube Alan Watts, one of the most profound philosophers of our time, I think. You know, he's passed now, but his stuff still holds up, and I'm still deciphering it. He's just amazing. And he talks about Buddhism a lot, but not just Buddhism. He talks about Tao and the Tao, and he talks about different religions, and he really, you know, he goes really deep, but then he also pulls you out and shows you how ridiculous some of the ideas can be, and where the pitfalls are and where the traps are, getting too involved in a particular system. And so I want you to understand is that when we're talking about this, and this is why I really enjoy this topic, simulation theory, is that if it's all just a simulation, then everything inside it is part of the program. You know, every system of belief, every religion, every culture, everything you experience through your senses is a product of the programming. And so you've got to be careful not to get too, like, the temptation is to get immersed in this experience. You know, think about it like it's a virtual reality game. All right, you put your goggles on, and within a few moments, if you've ever played VR, within a few moments, even though you know it's not real, you will start, your brain, there's parts of your brain that just start accepting that that's the new reality, that's the new norm. And so I had this experience where I was playing this, I got my VR on my PlayStation, you know, because, you know, I have to test it out to make sure it's safe for the kids to use. You know, that's why I did it. It's not for any other reason, because I like to play games or anything. So I got the VR, put it on, and within like 10-15 minutes, I started interacting and responding to the game and the characters in the game. Okay, now I'm not having full-blown conversations with them, but the voices in my head are answering back. The voices in my head are interacting with the characters. You know, when something pops into the screen that's supposed to scare you, my body reacts to it. Or, you know, when you're playing, you know, the motor racing game, you know, you're not actually moving anywhere, but you're getting this sensation of speed. And so, you know, you can notice that your heart starts to beat a bit faster, and you become more aroused, and the adrenaline starts to move through the body. So if we can do this through, you know, a virtual reality video game, or even watching a film, you know, on a TV screen that's outside of you, imagine the effect and the impact it would have if it was all connected straight into your brain. And that's what I'm trying to get across, is that with simulation theory, we would never know that it's just a game. We would never know that it's just a simulation. We can't know. And just the way our physiology is set up, the brain, like I said, doesn't have any direct contact with the outside world. It's all through the inputs. It's all through, you know, these external devices, just like your computer. The actual central processing unit inside the computer doesn't have any interaction with the outside world. And even the camera that it would use to do facial recognition, for example, is a device that's connected to it. So, and just like this microphone that you're hearing my voice through, it's not even the microphone that is on the computer, it's an external microphone. So although the accuracy we accept as being really precise, the voice you're hearing now, which is my voice, is not actually my voice. It's a reinterpretation of my voice. So what's happening is the microphone is receiving the sound, whatever it is. It has no bias over what the sound is. You're probably hearing the sound outside from time to time as well. And then what happens is all that information goes through the cable. The sound itself doesn't go through the cable. The digital interpretation of the sound goes through the cable, then goes into the computer, then it gets processed, and then it gets reconstructed as accurately as it possibly can. but there's no way to really know um, if that, how accurate that is in terms of when we perceive it. So even if that's perfectly accurate and the sound out of my voice is exactly the same as the sound going into the computer and being reconstructed, when you hear that sound, the way your mind is configured to hear, accept, reject, affirm, deny, reconcile that information, then it's going to merge into something else and it's going to be slightly off. It's just like Chinese whispers, you know. So if that's true, which I think it is, I believe it is, and we go one step further and we look at the person who's believing in old beliefs that everyone's new consensus is that it's not true anymore, but they're hanging on to their belief because that's all they know, and to make that transition into a new belief is just too traumatic, too much of a jump, and that they can find all sorts of information to support their belief, even if it's not true, right? And this gets into things like propaganda and at big scales, and marketing strategies, and influencing people and all that sort of stuff at bigger levels. If that all, whether true or untrue, has an effect on our physiology and our actions, and therefore creates our reality and our experience, or our experience of reality at least, then everything is really up for grabs. And I mean everything. So, we've all heard of the placebo effect. We've all heard of people, healing themselves from impossible odds, coming back and healing themselves. We've also heard stories, if you've read, Napoleon Hill, the old school self-help, what's the word I'm looking for? Pioneers. There's even stories about people who have willed themselves to death because, they believed that there was no way out of their experience. Okay, so the story there is that someone got locked in a bank vault, and because he understood the physics behind the space he was in, and the air and all that, and it was airtight and blah blah blah, that he actually willed himself to death because he believed that there wouldn't be enough oxygen inside the room before someone was able to come and the next morning and release him. But because he distorted time in his mind, he'd willed himself to death. And the thing is that there was, when they opened and found him, they were like, what the hell happened? Because first of all, they found him well before the time would have happened, before the air would have run out. And secondly, there was more air in there than what he had perceived was in there. Anyway, so even if he wasn't let out of the vault in the time that he expected, he still would have survived. Okay, so the power of the mind is king, and we can either allow ourselves to just flow along, with the accepted norm, or we can challenge and test them. And it doesn't have to be aggressive or, in an activist, anarchistic way. We can just, tinker in our lab. We can try on new things. We can, first of all, become curious about what's going on inside our own mind. And then, test those things out, question them, see where they came from, see why they're there. And before we do any changes and mess around with it, just see how useful they are. Are they still useful? If they're still useful, then keep them. If they're not, before you go and change them or delete them and have a big gap there, have a look at what the options are. See what there is. Don't just go wiping stuff off out of your mind, leaving an empty space for nothing. Does this make sense, guys? Is this useful? Okay, Rebecca wants to know, is there a position best for meditating? Well, that's a good question, because if we she enjoys lying down. Okay. Yeah. So, I hear a lot of different schools of thought. Do you sit up? Do you lie down? You got to remember, meditation is a state of mind. It's about, at first at least, it's about being able to get out of the rigid, habitual frequency that we talked about, and start to move into those other edges and start to perceive new things. And so, people say, oh, don't lie down because you'll fall asleep and then you won't be meditating. It's like, well, maybe you need sleep, first of all. Maybe you need some rest. Maybe not being rested is keeping you in that frequency. And maybe if you get some rest, then naturally you're just going to pop out into the new frequency and have a new experience. Just like if you're a person who's tired, like if you're a mum and you're taking care of your family, and maybe you're working as well, and you've got all these things you want to do, but then there's limitations to what you can do, so you have to do this and not that, and you're trying to manage all this, then that's a lot of mental fatigue, right? And maybe you need a bit of rest. Maybe you need to just chill out and have a nap. And if you keep doing that and you make that a habit, you might fall asleep for the first week, 2 weeks, first month. Okay, so you're napping, and then all of a sudden, you're not going to be so tired anymore. Okay, you will have resolved all those little sticking points in terms of fatigue that are stopping you from moving into a new frequency. And then you can start to lie down and you can meditate in that position, because the ultimate goal, when we're talking about lucid dreaming, is to go to bed, and instead of drifting off to sleep, is to actually pop off into the astral and start to leave your body and start to have, use your night to keep experiencing things in a new dimension. And so if you're not needing sleep anymore, then your mind is going to be still, you're going to start hold that consciousness, and then you're going to start to slip into alpha and theta, which is the dreaming state. But you're going to keep your awareness through that. You're going to keep your consciousness through that. And so to go one step further, when I was doing all my testing, brain scanning and all that, doing all these meditations, going into all these states, and then you get to lie down. And then when you lie down, most people just, they check out, their body goes into recalibration, adjustment, they fall asleep, they go into delta, deep rest. They can't remember who they are, when they are, where they are, and then all of a sudden they come out of the meditation. They feel wonderful, they feel rested, they feel healed, which is what you want. But ultimately, if you can keep your consciousness, stay awake just on that edge all the way into delta. If you can do that, maybe you'll slip into gamma. And when you slip into gamma, wow, that's magic land right there. I teach about astral projection. Um, yeah, I think it's a topic I'd like to be. Yeah, I definitely would love to feel like I'm in a position to be able to teach about that. Definitely, absolutely. Astral projection, lucid dreaming, lucid living. This is where it's all going. This is where we're all going. Is to pop out of this narrow field of reality, you know, accepting that this is all there is, and then moving beyond that. To put a metaphor that it's less. I don't know. Are we talking about just this one universe? Are we talking about just this one dimension? Are we talking about life on other planets? Are we talking about other timelines? Are we talking about multi-dimensional beings coming from other dimensions into this one? You know, there's a lot more um, possibility than what we're allowing ourselves to uh, to experience as being real. And so the first thing I think to be able to really step out of the limitations of the mind that's created the reality that we're in is to question the mind that is perceiving it first of all. And once we can question it, not in an aggressive way, but in a way where we just look at it and go, oh, okay, that's how it works. Or maybe that we can adjust this, or we can upgrade that, or we can, maybe we don't need to do that anymore. Then that allows us to expand into all these other areas that before, were fantasy, were science fiction. Just like, this thing was science fiction back in the 50s. Look, I mean, remember this? You know, calling all cars, calling all cars. Does anyone remember that? That was fantasy. That was comic book. That was like pure science fiction fantasy. Now, normal. It's just normal. So, I think we'll wrap it up there unless there are any more pertinent questions. Can I send YouTube links? Yeah, all the links. I'm posting up all the time on the Facebook Energetic Arts page and the Facebook Energetic Arts community group page. I'd send up a lot of pocket positives and little jokes here and there just to keep things light. But on the community page, especially, if you're going to go onto the Facebook Energetic Arts page, if you click on Visit Community and you join the community, I'll start to put a lot more of these deeper, longer videos on there for people who are really keen to learn more. Facebook page is sort of just to keep in contact and get new people in, but the community group is where I'm going to start to push a lot more information there that you can cross-examine and learn other aspects of what I'm talking about, and sharpen your skills there. Because at the end of the day, I want you guys to make up your own mind and have the skills and the knowledge to do that, and rather than just learn what I've, my mind and my techniques, because ultimately I think that's good to get you going, and you need to get there. And I believe in being a good student and learning as much as you can from the people that you're learning from. That's what I do, and put my old stuff aside while I'm learning new things. But then eventually, it all needs to be integrated, and you want to use that as a stepping stone to be able to pursue your own path and to make up your own mind. Because at the end of the day, it's your reality, and you're going to have to live with it. All right, guys, thanks for coming. I really appreciate you guys turning up and in on the live webinar. And the other thing is, um, I'm also, once we've done the live, whether who's here and who's not here, a lot of people are saying, I can't make little little videos that I've pre-recorded, um, that are just me spitting out whatever I want to say. All right, guys, thanks again for joining you. I'll see you next week, hopefully. And you know the drill, pass it on if you think it's going to help someone. Be discerning. You don't have to give it to everyone, but the people you think are going to benefit from this, go for it. And see you all again soon. Thanks, guys. Bye.